Hello again to another Agakale Reacts, and today we'll be watching two videos because it's the discovery of insulin, the miracle, and there's two parts to it from extra history. And it's because on the 3rd March 1921, Toronto's Dr. Banting and Dr. Best announced the discovery of insulin. So you're gonna learn about it. How does it work? And obviously, it helps a lot of people with diabetes.
January 19th, 1922, University of Toronto. Day and night, for 11 days, James Collop has been in the lab, preparing sample after sample of a hormone taken from beef pancreas. His team hopes this will save thousands of children a year, but in truth, it's one specific child Collop is trying to save. And it's a race. Lying in bed at a Toronto General Hospital is 14-year-old Leonard Thompson. At the time of his admission 1 month before, he weighed only 65 pounds. Thompson has diabetes, a condition that, in 1921, offers children no future except a slow and painful death. The rest of the team, especially Dr. Banting, is breathing down Collop's neck. His last attempt at an extract had proved too impure, and Thomas had an allergic reaction. But now, this time, Collop thinks he's nailed it. When he tests the blood sugar of an injected rabbit, he finds it dropped. Finally a breakthrough. He's closing in on the mysterious hormone known as insulin. This episode is brought to you by the Child and Teen Checkups Program of Minnesota. Childhood obesity and diabetes are on the rise, but they're preventable, and children from birth to age 21 may even qualify for free checkups. Learn more at u21checkups.com. Diabetes mellitus is a condition that's so old, it was known even in ancient Egypt. But there was no known treatment until the late 19th century.
I guess
even
it would, yeah.
All doctors could offer were starvation diets, a regimen where a patient was allowed nothing but coffee with whiskey to dull the pain, and then gradually, food was added slowly until their urine showed an acceptable glucose or sugar level. Today, we know that diabetes is a long-lasting health condition that affects how the body turns food into energy. It causes high levels of glucose in the blood and can damage the kidneys, heart, and eyes. But by the turn of the century, doctors were only starting to understand that. Also at the time, they didn't know that there were two types of diabetes. Adults typically have type 2 diabetes, which can be caused by obesity. So in that case, losing weight did alleviate some of the symptoms. But children usually had type 1 diabetes, and for them, starvation diets were dangerous, since children need calories to build and grow their bodies, and really have none to spare. And while limiting their food intake could slow death from kidney damage, fluid in the lungs, and eventual coma, most kids still only lived 6 months to a year in which they wasted away in diabetic wards, their parents mourning by their bedside before their children were even gone. But Dr. Frederick Banting thought he might be able to change all that. Banting was a farm boy born in Ontario, Canada. He was also a surgeon, having completed an accelerated medical degree in order to serve in an ambulance unit in World War I, where he was awarded the Military Cross. But he wasn't a researcher. So when he came to Dr. John James Rickard McLeod, the University of Toronto's foremost diabetes expert, and proposed an experiment, he got a chilly reception. Banting had read an article about how to keep the islets of Langerhans, which are groups of specialized cells in the pancreas, available for study without damaging them. And this was important because the islets had been suggested as the home of a substance called insulin, which was thought to have a role in diabetes. Now, just pausing here for a moment. This next bit will discuss surgical experiments performed on animals that were, even then, considered cruel. So, if you'd prefer to skip these specific details, please jump ahead around 20 seconds. Banting laid out his plan. They would get a healthy dog and surgically tie off the islets of Langerhans, keeping them alive, but letting the rest of the pancreas die off. Then, they would let the insulin build up, create an extract from the islets, and inject it into another dog that had been artificially given diabetes by the removal of its pancreas, all while they would monitor its glucose. McLeod was unconvinced. It had been tried by better doctors than Banting, who in his eyes was little more than a military surgeon that had no research experience or even an advanced degree. In fact, it took him 3 meetings before Banting badgered McLeod into sponsoring the experiment. McLeod gave Banting the use of the laboratory and an undergraduate, Charles Best, as his assistant. And thus began one of the most drama-prone research teams in history. And a lot of that was due to Banting and McLeod being fantastically mismatched. McLeod thought Banting was ill-prepared, with a shallow textbook knowledge of the pancreas. He felt the military surgeon kept botching the experiments. Meanwhile, Banting felt McLeod was undermining him by not giving him enough money for the project. Neither Banting or Best were paid, the lab space was dirty, and there was no money to hire an assistant to take care of the dogs. After several dogs died, Banting and Best were forced to start buying new experimentation dogs on the black market. But despite everything, they got results. And after showing they could use pancreas extract to help with diabetes in dogs, McLeod upped their funding. He also allowed Banting to bring in a fourth researcher, James Collip, to purify the extract. Plus, they made a further breakthrough when they found they could extract insulin from whole beef pancreas bought from slaughterhouses rather than the specially prepared dogs. Still, instead of publishing the results right away, McLeod made them run the dog experiments again and again. This made Banting furious, and he threatened to take his research to another facility, but McLeod wanted to be sure. And finally, once McLeod was satisfied with the repeated results, the discovery was announced in an article in 1921. It was a massive news event. Anxious parents clamored to get their diabetic children some of the new substance. But McLeod refused to move to human trials, partially over worries about Banting. Banting was a poor public speaker and not a diabetes specialist. Also, he stumbled during the Q&A portion of their first university lecture on the discovery, so there was that. This caused McLeod to increasingly insert himself in the press as the project's expert voice, making Banting think McLeod was stealing credit. They quarreled again, and embarrassingly, despite his eagerness for a human trial, Banting wasn't even qualified to run the experiments on patients. But at last, the data convinced McLeod a human trial could begin. Though due to Banting's lack of qualifications, it was doctors at the hospital that were assigned to administer the insulin, not Banting. Toronto General Hospital, January 11th, 1922. Leonard Thompson is about to get the first ever dose of insulin. Banting is forced to wait in the hall with Best as the young doctor injects the insulin extract. The doctors tell them that there's no significant drop in glucose, which they test by checking Leonard's urine. And he also developed swelling at the injection site, the kind of dangerous side effect that stops a treatment dead. That's when Collip steps in. The team believes the extract is just not pure enough, and Collip is the key to solving that. So, he works the problem day and night, developing a new process. And finally, on January 19th, all the late nights have paid off. He's managed to get pure insulin. But when Banting and Best ask Collip how he's done it, he refuses to tell them.
Why?
See, while they've all agreed not to patent insulin, Collip argues that his purification method falls outside of that. Banting clenches his fists, and in an explosion of shouting, things get physical. Now, we don't know exactly what happened next, but Collip ended up on the floor, agreeing he would not profit off the discovery. And on January 23rd, Leonard Thompson gets his second purified injection of insulin. Within an hour, his blood sugar has dropped. He feels and looks instantly better. In a rush of excitement, they make more insulin, then take it to the diabetic ward where 6 children are lying in diabetic coma. And by the time they've injected the 6th child, they can hear the first child's parents weeping and yelling in happiness as their son awakes. A miracle. A miracle Banting, McLeod, Best, and Collip sell to a Canadian government laboratory for the grand sum of $1. They resolve not to profit on this discovery, though all will get personal accolades, with Banting becoming the most famous man in Canada. But that didn't stop their arguing. In fact, fame and recognition would only turn up the heat further, because the story of insulin is not done. Because now that Banting, McLeod, Best, and Collip had discovered the miracle, they now had to find a way to mass produce it. And since these 4 men, racked with jealousy, paranoia, ambition, and mutual dislike, were about to enter an all-out battle over credit for the discovery, the drama was just getting started.
Really?
Once again, thanks so much to Child and Teen Checkups Program of Minnesota for sponsoring this series. You know, thanks to insulin, diabetes is now a manageable condition. In fact, it was recently estimated that there are over 15 million diabetics alive today that would have died at an earlier age without it.
Wow.
But due to the obesity crisis, diabetes is also on the rise among children. So you should talk to your doctor at your next Child and Teen Checkups Well Child Check about your kids' diet and exercise, and how they can stay in a healthy weight range while also being physically fit and strong. Not to mention, Child and Teen Checkups also provides free mental health screenings for those under 21. You can learn more and see if your child qualifies for free checkups over at u21checkups.com. That's the letter U, 21checkups.com. That's right, Zoe. Ahmed Ziad Turk, Alicia Bramble, Casey Mustia, Dominic May 3rd, 1922, Washington, D.C. Dr. James McLeod stands before the annual meeting of the Association of American Physicians, presenting a paper that makes fully public, for the first time, the results of their study. He describes how they've created a purified extract from beef or dog pancreas, and how in human trials, this extract has been proven to treat diabetes. And for the first time, they give the extract a name, insulin. The paper he presents credits McLeod,
where did the name
Banting,
came from, though?
Best, and Collip, as well as fellow researchers who'd worked on implementing insulin as medicine. And as the presentation ends, the audience gives McLeod a standing ovation, an action not seen at the meeting for 2 decades. But you know who isn't in attendance? Frederick Banting. See, he's back in Toronto, drinking himself to sleep and raging to anyone who will listen that McLeod is a grasping, unscrupulous, deceptive coward. Things are about to get interesting.
Whoa, why? What's going on? Why they can't just...
This episode is brought to you by the Child and Teen Checkups Program of Minnesota. Childhood obesity and diabetes are on the rise, but they're preventable, and children from birth to age 21 may even qualify for free checkups. Learn more at u21checkups.com. Exactly why Banting or his assistant Best didn't attend the presentation remains unclear. We know that McLeod spoke at the meeting because he was the only member of the team who was actually a member of the association, but from there, details get hazy. Some stories say that McLeod refused to let the pair come due to expense, or that Banting and Best sat it out in protest for not getting enough credit for the discovery. Yep, that's right. Despite the success of their first clinical trial, and the realization that they'd created a miracle drug together, Banting and McLeod were once again at each other's throats. When they'd succeeded in their first human trials, McLeod had brought more researchers onto the project to ensure the results were airtight before they announced them. Now, while that was probably necessary, he handled it badly, essentially demoting Banting and Best to extracting the insulin for the studies. And supposedly, he didn't even tell them the results of the experiments. Banting interpreted this as an attempt to minimize his role and hijack credit for the project. A project he'd had to drag McLeod
It's a lot of drama for something like that.
He entered a resentful depression, drinking heavily and not always bothering to show up for work. And a month before McLeod spoke at the event in DC, Banting contacted a journalist and provided quotes for an article telling the discovery from his point of view, emphasizing his and Best's role, helping to set the stage for a 4-way scientific feud of epic proportions. Which is unfortunate, because the discovery of insulin had been a team effort. It needed Banting for the idea and passion, McLeod for management and resources, Best for the experiments, and Collip to purify it. All of them had a necessary role, and the work wasn't done. Because while insulin worked, you can't have a medical treatment that needs to be painstakingly prepared by hand in a lab just before being administered. They discovered a miracle, that was true, but now they had to figure out how to produce and distribute that miracle at scale for patients that would need regular doses of it for the rest of their lives. Indeed, the reason McLeod had brought in more researchers in the first place was that this would be an even bigger challenge and require more specialists. And for a moment, it almost seemed like that effort would fail. Because as Banting scrambled for credit and McLeod presented in DC, Collip lost the knack for purifying insulin.
What?
See, to make bigger batches for the clinical trial, they'd changed equipment. And something about these new devices just wasn't right. They could extract enough insulin for the study, but the purification process was failing. They couldn't even produce enough pure insulin to dose a single patient. After a frantic 2 months and many recriminations, they discovered the problem lay in the heating process that evaporated the alcohol. Then, after stabilizing the temperature issue, they were able to supply the clinical trial. But only barely. Even working with the Canadian government-owned Connaught Laboratories, they couldn't make enough. They needed a partner with vast production capacity. So when the Indianapolis-based pharmaceutical company Eli Lilly and Company offered to form a partnership, the team decided to share their manufacturing process. And the team-up worked, with Lilly scientists tackling some of the issues with creating larger batches. And that was a big challenge. At first, the potency varied from batch to batch, which could be dangerous, and the doses deteriorated quickly. Yet within months, Lilly had solved both of these problems to create a purer, more stable form of insulin. But the work with Lilly made getting a patent even more necessary. At first, the team hadn't wanted to patent the process for making insulin at all. But as Lilly looked more and more eager to patent parts of the process, it quickly became clear that if the Toronto team didn't file for a patent, others might do so, and then produce doses with weaker quality control. So they revised their earlier plan, granting the patent to Connaught Labs for $1, and gave Lilly a non-exclusive license to produce their own version. Meanwhile, the wrangling over credit continued, as McLeod and Collip moved on to other projects, and Best finished his medical degree. Banting started a press narrative, putting himself at the center while minimizing McLeod and Collip's work. Now, McLeod mostly stayed above it at first, But when he heard the team was being considered for a Nobel Prize, he began publicly pushing back on what he called Banting's outbreaks. It got so bad that the university asked the two, plus Best, to write their own accounts of the discovery. They hoped to combine them and establish an official version, but that was abandoned when the results proved too cantankerous. But publicly, Banting's publicity campaign paid off. He was hailed as a genius scientist, got a reception with King George V, and was granted funding and a lifetime pension from the government, with the University of Toronto even adding a Banting and Best Chair of Medical Research. And then the Nobel Prize landed, jointly crediting Banting and McLeod. Can you guess who was furious? That's right, pal. Everyone. Everyone was furious. Banting was upset that they added McLeod but cut out Best, and McLeod was upset because Collip wasn't included. In fact, Banting even threatened to refuse the award.
There's only two people can be.
Friend sat him down and asked if he was really going to deny Canada's first Nobel Prize winner. I mean, it would be huge for the university. Okay. Banting did accept the award, but shared his prize money with Best, and McLeod, in turn, shared his with Collip.
Okay.
It didn't ultimately help. Though Banting and Collip became good friends, Collip was careful to stay out of the controversy. Banting refused to speak to McLeod for the rest of his life, and even soured on Best, who he thought was grasping for the chair named after them. Actually, in 1941, while serving as a wartime medical liaison to the UK, Banting boarded a dangerous transatlantic flight, and while talking about the possibility of a crash, he told a friend, "If they give my chair to that son of a Best, I'll roll over in my grave." And then that flight crashed, killing all but the pilot.
For real?
Did indeed inherit that chair, as well as Banting's fight to get as much credit as possible. The remaining team all went on to make more discoveries or author prominent works, though none ever achieved the same heights as the discovery of insulin. Yet whoever deserved the credit, and just for the record, we think they all did, the team's discovery left an incredible legacy. It gave children their lives.
True.
Leonard Thompson, on the verge of death when he received his first ever injection, lived to the age of 21 before dying of pneumonia. In 1922, Elizabeth Hughes, daughter of the U.S. Secretary of State, who at 14 years old weighed only 45 pounds, came to Toronto to privately receive her first course of insulin from Banting. She would have around 42,000 doses over her lifetime and lived to the age of 73. And insulin itself got better. By the 1960s, scientists were producing synthetic insulin rather than using animal extracts. And in 1978, researchers working with an Eli Lilly subsidiary produced the first synthetic human insulin by genetically engineering E. coli bacteria. Plus, delivery methods changed, from syringe to injection pens to ports and pumps. Though because these advances were not covered in the original patent, companies could more easily profit from them.
Yeah.
In fact, the rising cost of insulin, which doubled in the United States between 2012 and 2016, mostly due to manufacturer, insurance, and pharmacy practices, is increasingly becoming a political issue. How much is a person expected to pay for life-saving medicine? Well, if it was up to Banting, Best, McLeod, and Collip, as little as possible. And you know, maybe that should be their legacy. Because as much as they fought each other, they also fought for their discovery to be easily available so it could save as many people as possible.
Yes.
Once again, thanks so much.
That was really good. And I'm kind of curious about how much is it actually insulin and how often have to be taken. Because this is something that I don't have diabetes, so I don't have to worry about it. My mother have the type B diabetes, so she's always on or pre-diabetes or something. She's on the tablets. So let's just see how much insulin costs. Lilly cuts insulin. Eli Lilly, if I look, that's the first thing that coming up. Oh. And so here you go. So Eli Lilly and Company. So Lilly cuts insulin prices by 70% and cuts patients' insulin out. But how much does it cost? Let's say, okay, in Ireland. Cost of insulin by country, okay. Global average is $12.06, yeah. United States is 98.7. So Poland it's 528. Ireland it's 985. 3% diabetes rates, 190 ranked in the world, and Poland as well, 6.8. Health score 75.2. Where am I? Here. 58.4. Ireland is 79.3%. Poland is 6.8. America is 10, so that's high. And let's see, UK. 752. 6.3 diabetes rate. That's just... there's nothing about... I'll click on a country for data. Yeah. Turkey, it's 264, so it's the cheapest. Germany, $11. 14 and 4 in Japan. So the most expensive one is in the United States. Then we have Chile. Then there's Mexico. Then there's Japan, Switzerland, Canada, Germany, South Korea, Luxembourg, and Italy. And then there's just lower, is it? So that's this. Yeah. So well, I'm guessing the American prices are just a lot to do with politics and stuff, isn't it? That's what it have to be, because there's no other way that most of the, like, even the neighboring countries have them like slashed nearly 90%. Yeah. So that's it. So insulin, very good, a very important discovery. Like they said, it helped more than 15 million people live that they wouldn't if not the insulin. That's a lot, in my opinion. And yeah, it's just something that I'm guessing people are working, and it's kind of a weird thing about all those fights and stuff in between all those scientists there, but sometimes it happens, isn't it? Yeah. Hopefully soon someone we're gonna come out with something like that for cancer as well. That would be something. Yeah. So yeah, hopefully. So thank you very much for watching, and I see you tomorrow. Bye.